Hello everyone, this is Dino Chris from Prehistoric Facts. This is Prehistoric Facts special episode number 149. We're going to be talking about a prehistoric bird today, and that prehistoric bird is Gastornis. And so this is an artist illustration of what Gastornis possibly looked like. So it's the artist rendition of this animal. So Gastornis, some information about it. Its name means Gaston's lizard. It's not Robert Gaston from Gaston Designs. This is a different type of Gaston, so we don't know who this Gaston is. Its height is 6 feet tall, approximately 2 meters, weighed 300 pounds, lived 55 to 45 million years ago, the late Paleocene or mid to mid-Eocene, and found in North America, Asia, and Europe, and was found by Hebert in 1855. And so this one was actually found many years, long time ago. So in the upper left corner, we actually have here is the map of the whole world, and so Gastornis fossils are found mostly in the United States, Europe, and parts of Asia right around here. And so they're pretty much found mostly in the northern hemisphere. They never quite reached to South America, Africa, or Australia, or even Antarctica for that matter. So they never really reached there. And then you actually go to the size chart right here in the middle of the right, and so yeah, you can see it's based on how tall the head how from the foot to from head to toe is pretty much the height when you're actually looking at a bird. And then on the bottom left corner, you actually have is the illustration of the skeleton of Gastornis, and so Gastornis has some bones missing, but mostly it's a complete animal. More information about Gastornis. It belongs to its own family, the Gastornithidae. So those types of birds. And Diatryma was actually. And Diatryma is another name for this animal, but Gastornis is pretty much the actual name. So if some paleontologists still use the name Diatryma, it's because they still think Diatryma and Gastornis are separate animals, but really they're actually the same animal. It's just that they just have to give them different subspecies. And of course, with Gastornis, it has a large skull. It has probably great biting power. It's flightless, and so it does not have the ability to fly. And its diet is still debatable to this day. But the evidence is moving toward that Gastornis is a herbivore. For many years, paleontologists thought this was actually carnivorous bird, and so they actually thought that, like, oh, this is part of like the terror bird family. Even though Gastornis is actually kind of part of that, they're kind of pretty much kind of away from the carnivorous style, and so evidence is already building up that Gastornis is actually a herbivore, and so be feeding on like some seeds, fruits, those sorts of things. The environment in where Gastornis actually lived in, it was hot and humid, and this was actually hot 11 million. It was actually 11 million years after the extinction of the dinosaurs that this animal kind of came to be, and so it would still be hot and humid, but not as hot as it was back in the age of dinosaurs. There were a lot of ferns, cycads, flowers, and trees, and grass has not yet evolved yet, and so this was actually still This is pretty much pre-grass still, so before the grasses. And around the world, it was actually mostly forested, so there were a bunch of forests, like rainforest environment, even kind of like a deciduous type of forests that were around at that time, and so, but it was mostly going to be rainforest, and so you have that kind of environment. And of course, there was other kinds of animals around that time. There were insects, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and of course, mammals. And most of these mammals are still going to be small, probably about the size of like a domesticated pig. But you actually are going to see some mammals roaming around that time. So the extinction of Gastornis, it's mostly due to climate change. The Earth started to cool down about 45 million years ago, and so when that actually happened, the climate began to change. So, and that's all starting from the poles. So the South Pole and the North Pole. That's where you actually start to see some of the ice caps start to being formed a little bit. But Antarctica was actually the first one to actually start cooling down pretty quickly. And of course, the forests were shrinking in size, or less more open habitat was actually starting to happen, and so this means that all that open habitat would actually make plants actually kind of go towards those open habitats, and so you have some of those little shrubs still being around, and even some of the very first ancestors of grass actually start to actually really starting to come about, and but probably around, say, about 39 million years ago is when you actually start to see grasses really start to take over a little bit more. And of course, the plants changed, and predatory mammals were beginning to take over a little bit more. And so all those big predatory mammals, predatory mammals that we're actually going to see at that time, some of the hoof predators were starting to disappear, and then you actually have the creodonts and, of course, the entelodonts. Those animals were really starting to actually become very abundant at that particular time, around after 45 million years ago. So this is the map of the Eocene. So this is what the Eocene would have looked like at that time. So, but this is actually pretty much the story of how the extinction began. Is that you can kind of see a little bit of white starting to happen in Antarctica. Is because there's the glaciers are forming there. An ice cap is forming there. So that's where you actually have the global cooling start to happen. And of course, Europe was still a little bit like islands, but they were starting to actually kind of almost come together like that. And of course, North America is pretty much like this, and South America was isolated, and so Asia was not quite attached to Europe totally yet, but it's a pretty unique time in the Eocene. Now, the next episode will be on January 31st, 2020, and there'll be a Q&A episode. So if you got any questions about dinosaurs or any other prehistoric life, feel free to email me at dinochrist71@gmail.com, or also go on my Facebook page, Prehistoric Facts with Dino Chris. Like the page, you actually post your questions on the wall or in the comments section. And also for YouTubers out there, feel free to like the videos, subscribe to the channel, because that helps me a lot, helps the channel out a lot, and also place your questions in the comments section, and I read them all. And make sure you have 2 to 3 questions at a time. Because if you send me like tens of questions at once, I can't read them all, and then I actually have to look at ones that I can answer on video. And I want to make sure I actually have like at least a 10-minute video I can do. And so that's why I actually have to cut down the minutes on the video. But also keep your questions short and to the point. You can also follow me on Twitter at CSGRALL. That's my Twitter page. I post pretty cool stuff on there. Also, take care of the people around you. And also, for your younger people out there, make sure you listen to your parents, your teachers, and your guardians. It's the best motivation you can have. A good education is very important to have a good education. With a good education, you get a good job in the future. That's it for now, and I'll see you guys next time.